How's it going? My name is Trolls. Welcome to Soundpaint. This is all about our ultra deep sample Disco Strings. This is a group of 7 violinists that we've been recording over the last year and a half. And it's been an enormously long process because it's not just recording the instruments and editing and programming, but in terms of Soundpaint, it's also building the corresponding technologies to really facilitate a whole new level of expression. In fact, this library would not be possible in any other engine than Soundpaint. So I'm super excited to present it to you because it really marks a new stepping stone for us in Soundpaint. We're starting to do things that we simply have not been able to do before. Now, before we get started, let me just preface that this video here is all about playing through the Disco Strings without any other elements. We'll be going through most of the articulations. I'll be playing them on the keyboard so you can really hear what the library sounds like in its more raw, energetic, sort of vulnerable condition. But we also have another video where I'm demonstrating the Disco Strings in context to other music instruments as well. I made about 10 mini demos, so we're going to be talking about how to compose with Disco Strings, how they tie together with other instruments in the DAW. Link is in the description. Now, let's talk disco. You see, the origin of disco goes back to New York, the party scene that discotheques, as they were called. We're in the early 70s right now. There are 2 tracks that are often attributed to the birth of disco. One of them is Manny Dibango's Soul Makossa, one of my favorite tracks. It was actually designed to be the anthem of the Cameroon football team, but people adapted it because it has such a funky vibe. It's not a traditional disco track, but it set the tone for the vibe in terms of rhythm and groove. It really has a groovy kind of funky line, has some great saxophone licks as well. Fantastic track. But the other and perhaps more known person being the father or the maestro of disco was the great Barry White. He wrote perhaps the greatest love theme of all time, also called the Love Theme. You'll absolutely know it when you hear it. It's the most classical disco track probably ever written, particularly for Disco Strings. And perhaps more importantly is the fact that disco also became the theme for the LGBTQ+ movement even in the early 70s. It became the sound and anthem of their freedom and expression and unity as a movement. And I find it a beautiful and interesting juxtaposition that we have something seemingly lighthearted in the form of disco, and yet it had such an important cultural impact as well. I'm going to come back to that because in many ways one could argue that disco is actually the most influential music form we've seen in the last 40 years. But in the spirit of disco, which is all about drama, something happened on the fateful night on July 12, 1979. There was a baseball game in Chicago. There's a DJ that was announcing that he was just done with music. This was an anti-disco rally that would happen between these baseball games on the Chicago Stadium. He encouraged people to bring in their disco album and simply blow them up. And that apparently led to mass hysteria at the stadium. Things were actually blown up and significant damage was done to the stadium. I think they had to postpone games between the teams as well. It was a really big deal. And in a way, it put a shadow over disco because the media absorbed this in such a big way. And behold, from the shadows and ashes, disco would rise like the phoenix again in the form of house music, for example. I find it so fascinating that house music pretty much hasn't changed for the last 40 years. It's sort of electronic disco, if you will. We can take techno as well. Early days of hip hop was also disco-based. It's really given us so much musical groovy gold. There's nothing like disco, really. It's party energy. It's elegant in some ways as well. It's dance-friendly, light-hearted. This is really what this library is about. It's about passion, energy, accent. Disco is all about the highlight of life, the highlight of music. So in researching this library, I took the 10 most famous disco tracks known for their string writing and decided to build the most vast collection I could so I could rebuild all those tracks if I ever wanted to, and I would have every single articulation used combined with all the normal stuff we do with multi-samples. This is a very vast collection. We give the label of ultra deep sampling for the same reason. You have every articulation you can dream of in the conventional realm, but as you're about to see, we also invented new technologies, new types of articulations that we haven't had before in order to really respect those tracks. I'm thinking about ABBA, Dancing Queen. I'm thinking about Bee Gees, Staying Alive. I'm thinking about Chic, Le Freak. I'm thinking about Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson's amazing album, Off the Wall. All these and Donna Summer and many others were investigated to the greatest depth. In a way, we shouldn't call it Disco Strings. This library is really Studio Strings, just with very high energy, though it can do classical as well, pretty decently. For me, disco is all about energy and accent. Let's get into it. You hear that beautiful little sort of swoop at the very end. There's attention to detail in every single part of this library, even the end of the notes. We're going to talk a lot about that, about the accent in the note itself. Obviously, this is portamento legato. It's completely polyphonic. I can play as many notes as I want. We can play 8 notes, for example. So sweet. It's like love in the sound. We might hear a little bit of Bee Gees Staying Alive. That's because this portamento was specifically designed with that track in mind. I measured the exact length of the portamento in the actual track, the same type of energy and measured vibrato, and then we went back and did that exactly. We listened to the track, shaped the sound with the group, so we got exactly that, the perfect portamento for disco, high energy, just the right length of portamento. It's not too long, it's not too short, it's just perfect. Portamento. Disco strings to me is often about writing very nimbly and fast, sort of like run building qualities. We have that in the legatos and we have it in different ways. This is a run building legato designed for very fast and acrobatic playing, but we still have a sustain on the end note. I'm going to show another one that does not have a sustain for particular reasons, but this is sort of very fast traditional legato. Very fast, very nimble. It's really good playing it in octaves as well, particularly when we have this sort of high energy. It's quite common in disco string writing that we'll be doubling our octaves. Let's not forget about the great Bel Canto, the beautiful theme for Rocky and for Your Eyes Only, an old James Bond movie, but in the super style of disco. It's a phenomenal soundtrack. This legato here, we should almost just call the Bel Canto legato. It's right there. Now for me, when I play that last segment, I almost would rather have disco falls on those sort of very, very accentuated ones here. It sounds cool. It's a little bit sort of MIDI-like to me. Let me show you another legato here, which is layered. This is also using legato, but when I play really hard in the keys, I'm going to trigger the infamous disco fall, to which we have many different variations in this library as well. You'll see what I mean. That kind of style. It's so cool in 3 octaves too. Yeah, like that. Just really powerful, fast disco drops. You may have noticed on this particular legato here that the note can be very short. And there's a reason for that. Try to check out how real it sounds. It's very bubbly and alive, kind of bouncy. So da-da, it has a little bit of sort of swingy kind of vibe to it. This is a particular round robin based legato we've designed for very fast and acrobatic and realistic kind of playing. You can actually, because it's round robin based, play trills with it. This is something that happens once we get into the sort of deeper parts of the technology. We are no longer just restricted to traditional legato where you can't repeat patterns because you get what we call the machine gun effect. In fact, you can actually do repeated patterns here. And they're wicked fun to play in polyphony as well. So sweet, so nimble. We have 3 different kind of legatos. And if you ever want to create your own legato patches and do the layered legato we're doing here, let's say that you want those sort of disco falls to happen when you hit the keys really hard. You go into our sound mode here and layer the different legatos. If you look in here, we'll notice here that the velocity block for the disco fall is 127 to 127. That means that I really have to hit the keys at the very hardest in order to trick the disco fall. But if I set it down to 1 here, it's going to happen on every single thing I play. Here's another legato based around run building as well. This is using those very short fragmented notes. So don't expect a long sustain. We have that as well. But this is really for more sort of advanced, really fast run building. You might want to try different kind of scales with it, for example. It's just so beautiful that way because this is sort of the stuff we can't do, at least I can't do with conventional libraries because they weren't sampled at that depth. It's really, really a lot of samples triggering legato intervals once you start playing this in round robin fashion. But even in these short notes, I can still hear the disco, the energy, the life. It's just secretly in there in every note. So sweet, so nimble, just sort of precision sampling, if you will. It just feels very precise. I get what I want. I can do what I have in my mind. This is a cross between the disco falls and more nimble, sustained type of legato. Again, really fast, playable, and once you hit it hard, we get the infamous disco falls. It's just so sweet because I can play melodies, but I can also put more of an accentuation mark over my music if I want to do that. And it's liberating to have it right on my fingers. I can actually play it. I don't have to even sequence it. Disco Strings comes with 3 different vintage microphones. We have beautiful Ornaments, we have Royers, and then we have AKGs as well. Let me just try to play with the 3 microphones so we can do a side-by-side comparison. Different colors, different strokes for different folks. We can really get the type of vintage feeling we want. I'm doing the majority of this demo here with the Ornaments. In the other video I talked about, I'm doing it with the Royers. Each of them have different kind of characters and colors. The choice is completely ours. I just think it's so beautiful that we have these things at our disposal. The Royers are known to be a little more electric in their sound. I love the Ornaments here as well, and the AKGs. The AKG has a very, very vintage-like sound. It's the oldest of all the microphones. If we compare the AKG to the Neumann, different colors. The Ornaments are a little more silky maybe. And the AKGs have a little bit of a thinner but more pointy kind of profile. Just different kind of softness profiles, different kind of silk, if you will. Now, up to this point, we've been playing with what I would call conventional multisamples. Though we have round robin based legato and we have falls in different lengths and we have all the beautiful modularity of the Soundpaint engine, there are still certain things we can't do with conventional samples, which we are covering in a completely new articulation set called Ornaments. This is the first time, to my knowledge, it's ever been done this way, and it goes quite deep. We have 2, 3, and 4 note ornaments. And as you're about to see, there are tens of thousands of different ornament types and samples, so we can virtually do what we want to do. Ornaments are little melodic or scale-based fragments that we can combine in a multitude of ways. Right now, I'm going to take you through each of the individual ornaments and just play around with them, but you can build your own key switches. We also have a variety of key switch programs over here that combines all the different ornaments together, but I want to show them one by one because even one ornament can be super powerful. Let's begin our ornamental journey together with our 2-note ornaments. Right now, we're going to hear what essentially is chic le freak, da-da kind of style, but you'll see that I took that particular phrase because I love it so much, and then I sampled it in every single permutation, both in half steps, whole steps, and up to the minor third, in terms of covering all the individual intervals. This is really sort of the highlight of disco writing when it comes to accents. You can't do this with traditional multisamples. There's inherently legato happening even between two fast notes. That's an ornament. That's a 2-note ornament. Now, there's a lot we can do. Yeah, sure, we can do the classic, like, Le Freak kind of step. But we can also combine the ornaments in so many different ways. I'm sorry. So we can play with the fragments. We also have them recorded in unison, so I can go between small fragments and then to stable note. So combining small melodic fragments with unison notes as well. The unison is so easy to use. Now, this was just one ornament out of many, many dozens. Let me show you another one here, also in the slow family of our 2 notes, but this time we're going to go down to the minor instead. We can almost do these sort of like 70s Williams kind of things. And we can also combine it with spiccatos, for example. So combine fragments, combine unison notes with spiccatos as well. It's so easy to build our own key switches. Maybe we should do that. Let's just say that I want to try to combine, for example, what we just had, a unison fragment, a 2-note fragment, and a spiccato. Let me just clean up the UI and show you how quickly you can build your own key switches. So I'm going to write in like Disco Neumann, spic for spiccato, and just grab that guy here. And then I'll write like 2-note ornament, and you can abbreviate as well, and then just say, let's say minor Neumann. And we have that over here. And let's also say that we want 2-note disco, but unison note here as well. And now we have that as well. So we have all the key switches. We can see that they're automatically designated down here from C1 to D1. I want to pull that a little bit up 2 octaves. You can always just right click on the key switches here and say move key switches. I'll type in +24. That moves our key switches up here 2 octaves. So now they're easy to find here. And we got them on C3 to D3. So it just goes to show that there's infinite amount of ways to combine all these articulations, build your own key switches as well, really make the library your own. That's a part of the sort of sonic Lego philosophy we have in Soundpaint. Let's try this fast ornament here, played in a minor third. It's very filmic. And we'll notice that we can actually play the same key multiple times and get that natural round-robin variation even for the fragment itself. So really get that sort of digging in with the bow. Disco is all about digging in. It's about having a point of view, putting accents over everything. When I play these fragments here on the same key, and we can hear in the natural variation, that happens for every single ornament we have in the library, for everything we've done in this library here. It's just so alive, so much life inside of the samples. And it can also do the Sylvester thing. Now, that was me playing with the most simple ornamentation we have, which is 2 notes. But we also have 3-note and 4-note ornamentations. Right now, I'm going to play with a specific scale-based ornamentation. When it comes to the 3 notes, we have conventional intervals like we just listened to, half steps, whole steps up to the minor third, but also recorded a variety of scales, Dorian being one of my favorite, in the same notion. So it's both that we have melodic tiny fragments in normal sort of intervals, but we also have them in scales. So sweet. I always find it somewhere between minor and major. It's just like perfect for who I am. That's just the kind of stuff we can't do with multisamples. We can try, and our run building is pretty close, but there's something going on in terms of accents and how the bows are hitting, the fact that we record a round robin, that I would much rather just have this way here. You combine all these building blocks together and we can virtually do what we want to do here, but this is just so pretty. Here is another 3-note ornament in the major scale. You know, it just works. You know, combine the fragments, combine the multi-samples, combine it, DJ it any way you want. The whole concept here is just to offer you every single thing we would ever need for disco writing. I really wholeheartedly try to approach these libraries with the one thought in mind that I never have to come back and do it again. And it's also fun sometimes, because we're in scales, to play them polyphonically. So when you follow the scale on the keyboard, let's say with 3 notes. And another example of the classic pentatonic scale. Right? That is as disco as it gets. You know, we're there. We've arrived at the terminal of disco. Short notes. In disco, they're essential for writing. For example, here with our marcatos, these are not just your standard marcatos, they're energetic marcatos. We have round robin and many of them on every single key. So they're really, really playable, also on the same note. You know, they have those bubbles and life to them. If you look here inside of Soundpaint, you'll notice that I have both the spiccato and the marcato loaded on top of each other. I highly encourage you to shape your own programs in whatever shape or form you want. I kind of wanted to have more of that sort of percussive accent on the note, using the spiccatos on top of the marcatos. But we can also remove them and we still have round robin on the marcatos. Very live, and particularly when you play them in octaves, which is really, for the most part, what you're going to be doing with like melodic writing in disco. But the spiccatos do make a difference. Let's try to listen to them side by side. First without, and then with. Without. They're cool, we still got an attack, but we're lacking a little bit of that extra sort of dig if you want that. Let's talk a little bit about the room. The room we use for disco strings is a new room that I've fallen in love with. It's completely wooden and it's somewhat bigger, but it's still a room or a small studio, if you will. But for reasons that I don't fully understand, this room gives a lot of volume and body in the sound, and yet it's dry studio. For me, with studio libraries, they often tend to be a little bit sort of flat, dry, maybe nasal at times. But in this library here, it's really full body inside of it, and it also takes reverb super well. So this is completely dry. And this is with a little bit of plate reverb on it. Right? Disco right there. And with the marcatos, it's really, for melodic writing, almost better than legatos in my opinion, because disco is so much about the bow movement. We want to have that aggressive kind of vibe. We actually did that for the legatos as well. So you have bow movement on every legato transition. That's the disco style. But it's particularly pronounced here with the marcatos. It's just so sweet. And also up here, let's just appreciate for a second the higher part of the violin, where things get so delicate and fragile as well. It's all there. And we got some sweet pizzicato. You gotta have them in disco as well. Now, because we're in Soundpaint, there are magical things we simply cannot do in any other technology. One of them is to morph between different notes. So we have a specific type of new short notes called gradual shorts. And what's happening is that we're going from the shortest bow stroke you can make on the bow up to like a small maccato, but we have every single step in between. That means that we can do short and longer kind of lines, essentially controlling the bow length at 127 different variations. It's super neat, and the best way to demo it is actually inside of the ARP, because we can easily make arpeggiated patterns here. So if you notice here, when they're a little bit taller here, that means that the note gets longer, and when they're all the way down here towards the floor, that's when the note is the shortest, very brushy kind of spiccato. So for example, so we can control the length of the bow stroke. So sweet. I can create any rhythm I want, any tempo I want, any bow stroke combination I want. It's just so fluent because we're utilizing morphing technology between all the different velocity layers. But let's try to amp it up here. Let me go to like 140 BPM here, and let's do like a 7/8, like classical, like Simmer-esque rhythm. Now, this is one style of what we call gradual shorts. This one is our gradual shorts drama that we just listened to, so it has an enormous amount of energy. But we also made another one which is slightly softer recorded. It's still punchy and energetic, but it's designed for a little bit sort of softer ostinato writing. We call it gradual suites. Let me use the ARP here to demo this one too. And let's try to create something entirely new here. Let's go to like 120 and make something disco-like. Maybe like do Italy disco, da 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 da. And I just love that we can hear the fragile aspects of the violin. These are real players. Runs, one of the most essential building stones in disco. When I think about runs, I just straight go to Barry White because he used them so beautiful. We have run building legato. We have other tools we can create runs with in the library, but we also recorded all the runs we possibly could think of in context to disco. We have Dorian scales, we have minor, majors, pentatonic, we have up and down, we have round robin on every single key, so you can virtually do anything you want. The runs are based in octaves, but as I'm about to demonstrate, you don't have to play them in their full length. You can also sort of put them together and create new runs out of them. The key switch down here is going to let me go from up to down motion on each of the scales here, beginning with the Dorian. Lots of energy in these samples as well. They're not just runs, they're runs with sustains. You don't have to let them sustain, you can just go like, and then go into whatever note you want. But you can also sustain them, which is kind of useful when you want that run to go into something else, and you have that sort of connected quality to them. But because they're in octaves, we can sort of let one daisy chain to the other ones in octaves. 2 octaves instead of just 1. Or you can go 3, which is really, really hard for players to do in reality. But don't just think of them in octaves. We can also play them in fifths, like. Energy in every single note. They're also fun to play in chords. Be careful not playing them too much because it gets pretty like big sounding. I also love they have sort of a little bit of a sort of scratchy, whooshy quality. They go like, and then a little bit of a Mikado sort of swoop at the end. They're not static. No samples in this library are static because disco is not static. So listen for that sort of woo, and then just the power of the sustain. Now, this was Dorian runs. As I mentioned, we also have them in major and minor and pentatonic. Here's the major. Let's try the minor runs as well. Power, power, power. The pentatonic is also cool. It's a different scale. It has a fewer notes in the scale, but really great for disco as well. You can also use the time stretcher in case you want to like sculpt them a little bit to fit your tempo. So just going to time here, move the speed knob. So for example, normal speed. Go a little bit faster. Go a little bit slower. You can really adapt the runs to any tempo you want using the rack time module here. They're also round robin based, so even if you play the same run, it's not going to be the same. There's enough variations in every round robin that you just get that sort of natural variance. It's cool because that way you can play repeated runs as well. One of the essential cornerstones for writing for disco strings is the infamous disco drop or disco fall, like this. Now, I wanted to really get it right. So we actually sampled the disco falls in multiple round robins and in 3 different speeds as well. This is the super fast one, so really good for like very fast kind of writing, very accented writing. And you'll notice in the interface here that we can also connect it with a spiccato, giving a little more like tone on the initial hit. But it gets a little bit mechanical when we have that many falls. So the fall is really to be used normally in the end or the very beginning of a phrase as a sort of unique accent, if you will. So normally it would be something like, you know, you use them on sort of like rhythmic places where they just make sense for statements. In the same placement, you would often use a brass stab as well. So either towards the end or the beginning of a phrase, just to give that sort of tension to it. So this was the super fast disco drop. Let me play you the fast one as well. It's a little bit longer. I guess this could be cool as a horror effect as well if you use like crazy time on it maybe. Really try to make it like super like slow and weird. Yeah, it has a little bit of like a horror vibe to it. I guess that's going to be more pronounced even on the slow ones here. Now, keep in mind that we've not been using the time stretcher. We've been playing 3 different parts that were 3 separate recordings to get disco falls or drops at 3 different speeds. Let me just try to compare them side by side by loading the key switch module here for the falls. We have them all 3 on our key switches. You combine that amount of granularity and control, combine it with the time stretcher, and we virtually covered every single possible way you could ever do a disco fall at different lengths with round robin in every single key, anything you really want. There's a lot of energy in the sustains as well. And with disco, there's often, particularly with Barry White, a lot of beauty in the softer notes as well. So we worked a lot on trying to get tension and energy in the softer notes. Great violinists will tell you that they can create a type of forte even in the lower dynamics by creating more tension on the string. It's a form of vibrato, if you will. It just has energy in it. One magical aspect about our sustains is that I never get the same result every time I play the same key. That means we have natural variations of the sustains. The best way to describe that is that it's a different kind of form of legato almost. It's better for certain styles of writing, especially if I want to do repeated kind of movements in the strings. You'll see what I mean. Isn't it beautiful up here? I mean, there's such tension up here. Energy, energy, energy. What's the right word? Is there another word for it, like empowered, superpowered strings? It reminds me a little bit about the beautiful soundtrack, The Little Buddha by the great Rishi Sakamoto that sadly passed not too long ago. Now in Soundpaint, all articulations live together, so we can easily create our own programs. In this program here, for example, I wanted to go from sustains into tremolo, but you can also make your own programs and go into sustains to legato, or sustain into trills, or to short notes, whatever you want. But this is sort of a classical patch where we go from sustain into more sort of dramatic tremolo. Even just that very last note when it ended, you can just hear one player being a little bit like, like that's the life in the library. It is so full of all these enriched, life-empowering, no AI kind of sounds. Like this is real, this is for real. Down to every single bow stroke is something entirely new. Here's another program featuring the tremolos as well, but in this case we have a secondary part with spiccato on it. So if you want a little more accent on your tremolo, you can do that. If you don't want it, switch it off. But it's just to sort of cater towards the idea of accented disco string writing, if you will. At all times, we want to have all the tools at our disposal. So throw in a spiccato on a different part, set the key switch, just so you have it in case you need it. Like, that's a very nice tremolo, but if we add the spiccato to it, we get a little more of a sort of punch in the beginning. Okay, so for me, for this one here, I would love a disco fall when I hit it hard. So I'm gonna go into parts here. We're gonna find a disco fall. I'll throw it in part 3 here, go into sound mode and set the velocity block here at 127. So it's only gonna trigger when I hit it really hard, but now we have it in there. Let's try again. So we have spiccato, tremolos, and disco drops. It's kind of cool how they randomly come in sometimes. I like that. This is sort of natural, more like, hey, that could happen in a real track. I think sometimes we're too clinical when we work in the computer. In real life sessions, stuff just happens. That's a happy accident, maybe. And you can really hear like just the life of the room. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. This is so important to get the realism in there. Often as developers, and I'm guilty of this as well, we are too clean in our approach to sampling. But now with Soundpaint, which in many ways we can make dirty in the code, if you will, we can do a lot of things underneath the hood to make everything sort of come alive. We also have a bucket load of trills. We sample them both in half steps, whole steps, and minor thirds as well, just to get that little bit of extra so you're really fully covered in all regards. Disco Labs is all about having fun with the library, trying to find the beauty in disco strings, but also the beauty in other Soundpaint instruments. As you may know, in Soundpaint, all instruments simply live together, so we can cross-pollinate from one instrument to another one. For example, I found that old vintage Juno synthesizers really just worked amazingly with the strings. This first patch here is an 11-bit downsampled kind of disco vibey thing. There's just something about this particular bit rate that I liked. Now, for those of you who own our Adastra chamber strings, I also made a patch here combining the Disco Violins, but together with the cello, viola, and bass from our Adastra chamber strings, and they work surprisingly well together. Really a lot of brightness coming from the disco strings, but they fit perfectly in the hall. And let me just add to that. We often talk about, oh, it has to be recorded at Air or Abbey Road or whatever. It's absolutely not true. What really matters is not where we record things, is what we record in those places. Some of the greatest drum grooves ever made were recorded in a stairwell. There's so many stories like that. Adastra was recorded in a beautiful church, and it's amazing that actually works together with violins recorded in a wooden studio. It just goes to show. Let me show you. So much love and power here. Now, we discussed gradual shorts, but in this case here, I'm playing it a little bit differently. I'm using our rack time module to lengthen or shorten the bow stroke of my spiccatos on the mod wheel here. I just happen to love this sound. It's very, very playable. Everything is very real-timey. So it just goes to show that we have our gradual shorts morphing the notes, but we can also use time stretchers, and we can use it all combined as well. Just, freedom to produce how we really want to produce. I mean, for me, this is like making love to the keys, honestly. When it just works, when there's no hindrance between me and the piano, it's really just, shaping to my inner world. This was exactly how I wanted it to be. And near infinite amount round robin, so the ear doesn't pick up upon any repeated notes here. It's just all fresh. Here's another experimental disco patch from the Disco Labs, combining 3 Juno 60s together with the spiccato from the Disco Strings. So sweet. These are our new analog model filters inside of Soundpaint. We're going to come back to them soon with a massive update as well, but this is just a little bit of taste of it. It's truly a ladder filter on steroids. Now, we also have a variety of key switches in the library. This is where we're combining all the individual articulations. This is really useful for those of you who like to work in the DAW and have everything in front of you and be able to choose whatever articulation you want at the key switches. We have another video where I'm demonstrating how to write for disco strings. I've made about 10 mini demos and I'm combining a bunch of different fragments and key switches together in those demos as well. So those are really excellent if you want to know more about how to combine all the elements you've seen in this video here. But as you can see, the key switches here are elaborate. We have all the ornaments, we have all our short notes, our sustains, anything we need to have this disco toolbox in front of us. Do forgive me if I seem overly enthusiastic about this library. It's just, for me, it's been a year and a half of trying to go as deep as I possibly could into the world of disco and create this whole universe of sounds in front of me, this massive toolbox. So I know I can do whatever I want to do should I ever want to write a disco track. And for me, as a developer, I think that's like the highest achievable goal we can have. But also be very respectful to the individual genres and subgenres of music as well. I've heard a lot of mock-ups trying to do things with libraries that they weren't designed to do. This is disco strings, this is studio strings, it's high energy all along. You may not be able to write your perfect adagio with this. That's not the intention. In fact, it's probably the opposite, unless you want to write a disco adagio, which would be amazing, of course. This is Disco Strings, this is Soundpaint. Have fun, be free, you know, let's embrace the whole spirit of disco as well. And bring back the discotheques. Like, can we just party and not shut everything down at like 9:30 p.m. like they do here in LA? Can we just be free and together and create something cool? And fuck all this AI stuff.